All right, everyone, conservative nationalism, populism, and traditionalism are set to become a permanent part of the Russian state. We're going to take a look at some of the new proposals to the Russian Constitution by President Vladimir Putin and how they unambiguously signal the rise of a new conservative age. You're going to absolutely love it. Greetings, everyone. Dr. Steve here with you. It's wonderful to be with you each and every day. I want to say that. And a wonderful Saturday to each and every one of you. If you haven't already done so, make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. It'd be an absolute privilege to have you as a regular part of this channel where each and every day we analyze current events in light of super awesome conservative trends so you can live in the present, in light of even better things to come. And it really doesn't get better than that, does it? Before we get into the amazing transformation of Russia and this new constitution, pretty impressive stuff, make sure to download your free gift, which we put together just for you. We're calling it our Fake News Antidote. And what it is, it's a compilation of about, well, it's a little more than 20 sites I go to for my news each and every day, and you can download completely free at the link down below in the pinned comments section. I think you're going to find a very, very enriching and valuable resource. And then finally, let me ask you a question. Did you miss out on becoming a millionaire, if not a billionaire, from the Bitcoin wave? Gang, if you haven't gotten on this 5G bandwagon yet, you're really missing out on another once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. A new economy centered around 5G is sprouting up all across the USA. Early investors may be able to see returns of 5, 10, maybe even 100 times their investments. 5G is going to be huge, and if you want to see how, watch the free educational video at thefuture's5g.com. Just click on the link below to learn more on how to get in and profit on the hot trend that's about to change the way we live our lives forever. All right, so let's dive in here. Some very, very interesting stuff coming out of Russia. I'm sure many of you know Russian President Vladimir Putin has proposed a number of changes and additions to the Russian Federation's constitution. We're now getting a better idea of the nature of these changes, and I'm very, very appreciative of the work of the Russian scholar Paul Robinson, who writes over at irrationality.com for his overall assessment of the constitutional changes that Putin is proposing. So what we're finding is that Putin is largely tapping into the overwhelming conservative nationalist mood that has overtaken Russia over the last decade. And he's decided to basically enshrine that mood into the Constitution, making it a permanent part of the Russian state and the nation. Very, very interesting stuff for sure. So let's look at some of the proposals here. And now I say proposals rather loosely, and that's because Russia, of course, is a presidential republic, which means that the vast majority of powers are centered on the presidency. So these proposals are almost certainly guaranteed to be approved and become constitutional law in the Duma, the Russian parliament or legislature. And while there are some very interesting proposals to devolve some powers away from the presidency over to the Duma, President Putin is clearly stamping his 2 decades of presence as president as a permanent part of the Russian constitution moving forward from here. So let's dive into some of the proposals and see if we can make some sense of what's going on here. First, there's going to be a new preamble that enshrines God in the Constitution. Here's what it says. The Russian Federation, united by 1,000-year history, preserving the memory of our ancestors who gave us our ideals and belief in God, and preserving also the succession and the development of the Russian state, is a historically composed state unity. Okay, now there are 2 very interesting things in that preamble. First, there is a clear gesture to the Russian Orthodox Church and their revitalization and their role in rebuilding Russia after 70 years of communism. We've done a number of videos on the miraculous rise of the Russian Orthodox Church over the last 3 decades. Again, we cannot stop to appreciate the fact that when the Soviet Union fell in 1991, Christmas Day 1991, there were only about 6,000 churches in all of Russia. Today, there's nearly 40,000. That's more than 1,000 churches a year being founded. It's absolutely astonishing. And all the Russian Orthodox monasteries that were so characteristic of the Russian landscape, like during the days of the Tsars, they were completely eliminated in the Soviet period. Today, there are over 1,000 of them. All right, they're vibrant. When the Soviet Union fell in 1991, only about 30% of the Russian population identified as Russian Orthodox. Today, that number has jumped to an astonishing 70%. It really is absolutely astonishing. We've talked about the study that was done back in 2012 by the Journal for the Scientific Study of Religion. And they concluded that Russia was indeed going through a genuine religious revival that was reshaping every sphere of Russian political and cultural life. So God will now be invoked in the Russian Constitution, which again, given the atheistic militarism of the Soviet Union for 70 years, that itself is testimony to this religious revival. But secondly, you'll notice too in this preamble that there is an affirmation that all of Russia's past is part and parcel of an integral whole, okay? The Russian Federation stands in continuity with both Russia's Tsarist past as well as its communist past. And I think communism here is being seen as Russia's unique modern secular constitution. So if the Tsar was the pre-modern, pre-secular Russia, and if the Soviet Union was modern secular Russia, then that makes the Russian Federation the postmodern, post-secular Russia, okay, which of course is a further indicator that we are indeed entering into a post-secular and therefore post-globalist age, which is far more conservative, far more religious, far more nationalist, populist, and traditionalist. And of course, that's what we celebrate each and every day on this channel. A new conservative age is rising, right? You see, you are on the cusp of history. So that's the first big amendment, the preamble to the Constitution, affirming God and the Russian state as the custodian for Russian history and identity that has a certain continuity to it. Secondly, and here's the big one when it comes to leftist, globalist, Western media, this is what they're fixated on. The Russian Constitution will officially limit marriage to one man and one woman, which of course renders so-called same-sex marriage unconstitutional and permanently illegal and banned in Russia. They further declare that children are the most important property of the Russian Federation and are therefore to be protected. This is part of Russia's effort to enshrine traditional family values as a permanent part of their public policy to overturn their fertility deficiency, which Russia has been quite successful in doing. We've done a number of videos on Russia's successful reversal of its demographic decline, largely through its adaptation of or it's adopting, I should say, pro-life legislation and policies. Hungary, Poland, Georgia, they've taken similar steps as well. So as part of that, Russia has severely limited abortion practices. It's resisted the Western push to have gay and lesbian lifestyle values, redefine the traditional family, which of course is indispensable to having children. So Russia has interwoven their distinctive Christian identity, their traditional family values, and their public policy into a coherent, now constitutional whole. Thirdly, the Constitution will enshrine the Russian language as the official language of the Federation, which is important because Russia is made up of many, shall we say, micronations. There are over 100 different ethnicities in Russia. A lot of people don't appreciate that. And there are many parts of their massive country where Russia is just simply not the first language. So the Constitution also refers to the ethnic Russian people as the state-forming people. Now, we've talked about this before in other videos. It's very interesting, but what Russia is doing there is they're recognizing that all cultural traditions are rooted in an ethnic people. All cultural traditions are in some way, shape, or form ethno-cultural traditions. But the key here is that ethno-cultural traditions are often far wider and bigger than the ethnicity that gave birth to those traditions. So I like to give the examples of how some of the best interpreters and practitioners of the German classical music tradition were born and raised in cities like Shanghai and Beijing, right? Or another example, my favorite, right, given my family, my wife is from Japan. You may be surprised to learn out that for 17 straight years, the national sumo wrestling champions were from either Bulgaria, Estonia, Polynesia, or Mongolia. 17 straight years without a single Japanese sumo wrestling champion. The ethnocultural tradition of an ethnicity is larger, it's wider than the ethnicity proper. It's very similar to the way many who live in Lancaster, Pennsylvania are not themselves Amish, but they're nevertheless highly supportive and protective of the characteristic tranquility of Amish culture and landscape that they've grown to love and revere. So the new Russian constitution would acknowledge the unique contribution of the Russian ethnic people to the Russian Federation culture that by its nature invites all nations and ethnicities to participate in it. And why I find this interesting is it's very different than the Western liberal tendency to render culture and ethnicity and ethnic identity irrelevant to the state. The state is supposedly neutral to all questions of culture and ethnicity. And this Western liberal tendency is, of course, collapsing today under the weight of the new nationalism, which puts a premium on ethnocultural identity. And we're seeing a perfect example of that collapse here with the new Russian constitution. So as you can see, there is this clear interweaving of Christianity, history, traditional family values, and Russian ethno-nationalism into their new constitution. Fourth and finally, there's a lot more going on, a lot more proposed amendments, of course, but this will suffice for us here. Fourth and finally, I think it just bears mentioning that Russia has indeed doubled down on the annexation of Crimea. No surprise there, of course, but the Constitution will make it illegal to even discuss or to even propose the notion that Russia should give up any of its current territories, which of course would include Crimea. It's not entirely clear, just again, how it would relate to the ongoing issues that Russia has with Japan regarding what's called the Kuril Islands. We'll have to see on that one, but nevertheless, the current territory of Russia will be largely non-negotiable under the new constitution. So there you have it. While the number of changes to the Constitution they're quite complex. They could get us deep into the mud of the minutia of the whole Russian political system and the like. What is increasingly clear, big picture, is that the new Constitution will permanently enshrine the new nationalist populist traditionalism that has so dominated Russia of late as part and parcel of Russian national identity for generations to come. Fascinating stuff. Now, before you go, you will definitely want to check out my new video I just uploaded on Trump suing CNN for defamation. And I show how it's all part of a new trend among conservatives who are rising up and taking the fake news of the mainstream media to court. You're going to absolutely love it. So make sure to click on the link and I'll see you over there. God bless.